What if one of the most influential spiritual traditions in Western history has been hiding in plain sight? It is repeated in books, symbols, lodges, alchemical diagrams, and modern occult teachings, yet it is almost always misunderstood. Most people hear the word Hermeticism and think of vague universal laws, cryptic sayings, or internet mysticism. But the real story is far older, far stranger, and honestly, far more important. Hermeticism is not just a collection of ideas, it is a worldview. It is a method of inner transformation. For many initiates, it is a map of how the human being can remember what it truly is. Once you see that, you start noticing Hermetic traces everywhere. You see it from late antiquity to Renaissance magic, from alchemy to Rosicrucianism, and from esoteric Masonry to modern ceremonial orders. So the real question is not just what Hermeticism actually is. The real question is why so many traditions kept returning to it, as if it preserved a key they simply could not afford to lose. Hermeticism takes its name from Hermes Trismegistus, which means Hermes the thrice great. He is a sacred figure formed through the blending of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. In other words, Hermeticism was born in a world where cultures were meeting, overlapping, and interpreting one another. Its historical roots are usually placed in Hellenistic and Roman Egypt, especially between the 1st century before Christ and the 1st century after Christ. During that time, Alexandria was one of the great intellectual and spiritual crossroads of the age. This really matters because Hermeticism did not just appear out of nowhere. It emerged in an environment shaped by Egyptian temple religion, Greek philosophy, astrology, and mystery cults. It was born from the exact same late antique hunger for revelation that also gave rise to Gnostic and Neoplatonic currents. At its core, Hermeticism is a body of texts and teachings centered on the divine mind, the living cosmos, the spiritual dignity of the human being, and the possibility of inner rebirth through knowledge. This is not knowledge in the modern sense of just collecting information. This is knowledge as a true awakening. The most important early sources are the Corpus Hermeticum, which is a collection of dialogues and revelations attributed to Hermes, and the Asclepius, which explores cosmology, divinity, and sacred practice. Then there is the Emerald Tablet. It is much shorter and probably came later, but it became enormously influential in alchemy and later esotericism. One of the very first things that serious students learn is that Hermeticism is not just one single block of thought. There is a philosophical Hermeticism, which is concerned with God, the mind, the soul, and spiritual regeneration. Then, there is a more technical stream associated with astrology, alchemy, talismanic arts, and practical occult operations. This is exactly where the tradition becomes far more profound than many people expect. In the Hermetic texts, God is the source of all things. This source is beyond ordinary language, yet it is fully present through the divine intellect that orders the cosmos. The universe is not just dead matter. It is completely alive. It is structured, meaningful, and full of correspondences. The human being is seen as a microcosm. We are a little universe reflecting the greater one. That idea alone would echo for centuries. It meant that to know yourself was not merely a psychological exercise. It was cosmological, and it was theological. To descend blindly into material obsession was to fall into a state of forgetfulness. To awaken was to remember your own origin inside the divine mind. In my opinion, this is the exact moment when Hermeticism stops being just some old doctrine and starts feeling deeply personal. It suggests that our confusion is not just ignorance. It is actually a kind of sleep. That is also why Hermeticism is so often compared to Gnosticism, even though they are not identical. Both traditions speak of awakening, revelation, and liberating knowledge. However, many Hermetic texts do not treat the cosmos as an evil trap created by a false god. The world can certainly be a field of bondage when you experience it through ignorance, but it is also a deeply sacred expression of order. That distinction is incredibly important. Hermeticism is not simply world-rejecting. It often sees the cosmos as a living symbol. It is a layered manifestation that can either lead the soul downward through attachment or upward through profound insight. This is one major reason it could later resonate not only with Gnostic style seekers, but also with Platonists, magicians, Christian esotericists, and alchemists. Its relationship with pagan traditions is deep and organic. Hermeticism grew directly inside the religious and philosophical atmosphere of the ancient Mediterranean. It shares a reverence for cosmic order with Egyptian sacred science. It shares a language of intellect and metaphysics with Greek philosophy. And it shares the idea that visible and invisible realities mirror each other with astrological and theurgic traditions. It truly belongs to that older world where stars, rites, symbols, divine names, and the human soul were all part of one sacred architecture. So, when people ask whether Hermeticism is pagan, the best answer is that it arose within the late pagan world, but it also reaches far beyond any simple label. It acts much more like a bridge. It links temple wisdom, philosophy, ritual, and contemplative ascent. If you have made it this far into the video, comment the word microcosm below if you can see why Hermeticism became so much more than just a historical curiosity. Because once you understand that one single principle, a lot of esoteric traditions will start to look completely different to you. As late antiquity gave way to the medieval world, Hermetic ideas did not just disappear. They survived through fragments, translations, reinterpretations, and especially through their close association with astrology and alchemy. Over in the Islamic world, materials linked to Hermes circulated with tremendous prestige. Hermes himself was very often treated as a primordial sage. During this period, the Hermetic image became even more intertwined with sacred science, celestial influence, and the transformation of nature. The famous phrase from the Emerald Tablet, which is often paraphrased as above, so below, became a powerful shorthand for a much deeper doctrine of correspondence. This doctrine teaches that the structure of reality repeats across all levels, and that the lower levels can actually reveal the higher ones when you learn to read them correctly. Then came the Renaissance, and with it came one of the greatest Hermetic revivals in history. In 15th century Florence, Marsilio Ficino translated the Corpus Hermeticum into Latin under the patronage of Cosimo de' Medici. For Renaissance thinkers, these texts seemed to preserve an ancient theology that was older than Plato and older even than Moses, at least according to what they believed at the time. That timeline eventually turned out to be mistaken. It was later corrected by Isaac Casaubon in the 17th century. He showed that the texts actually belonged to late antiquity rather than some remote primordial age. But that correction absolutely did not erase their impact. Ficino, Pico, Della Mirandola, and later thinkers saw in Hermeticism a brilliant vision of the human being. They saw us as mediators between worlds, fully capable of ascent through wisdom, virtue, contemplation, and sacred operations. This perspective helped to shape Renaissance magic, natural philosophy, and the beautiful dream that religion, philosophy, and occult science could all be reunited once again. From there, Hermeticism truly entered the bloodstream of Western esotericism. Rosicrucian currents completely absorbed its language of hidden wisdom and inner regeneration. Alchemy took its rich symbolism and deepened its psychological and spiritual dimensions. Esoteric Masonry, especially in its more contemplative and initiatic interpretations, found a very strong resonance with Hermetic themes. These themes included the human being as a temple under construction, the visible form acting as the shadow of invisible principles, and the steady ascent from roughness to refinement, moving from a scattered mind into a centered intelligence. Later on, The so-called Hermetic Kabbalah fused Kabbalistic diagrams with Hermetic, astrological, alchemical, and magical correspondences. By the 19th and 20th centuries, orders such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn turned these Hermetic ideas into highly structured ritual systems. Even modern currents as totally different as Thelema ended up inheriting a large part of that symbolic grammar. But there is something very important that needs to be said right here. Not everything that is called Hermetic is actually equal to ancient Hermeticism. Over time, the tradition was expanded, it was adapted, and sometimes it was flattened out. One of the clearest modern examples of this is the Kybalion. Whether people love it or deeply criticize it, its overall influence is completely undeniable. It popularized a specific version of Hermetic teaching for modern audiences, especially through its famous principles. But you have to understand, it is just not the same thing as the original Hermetic texts. Serious students eventually have to learn how to separate classical Hermeticism from later New Thought style reinterpretations. I personally think that distinction really matters. I say this not to gatekeep the knowledge, but to help recover its original depth. Because when Hermeticism is reduced down to catchy slogans, you lose the absolute drama at its center, which is the total transformation of human consciousness. So, how do real initiates actually use this knowledge in daily practice? Well, usually not by just quoting abstract maxims all day long. Instead, they use it as a strict discipline of perception. They study correspondences, not as some kind of superstition, but as a practical way of training the mind to see patterns, hierarchy, and symbolic order in everything. They meditate deeply on the unity hiding behind multiplicity. They work with ritual, prayer, contemplation, planetary timing, sacred geometry, or alchemical symbolism, all depending on their specific lineage. They observe their own inner states as if the great laboratory were the human soul itself. In practical Hermetic work, your personal anger might be treated as lead that needs to be refined. Your attention acts as the fire, your intention acts as the mercury, and your conscience is the hidden gold that you are desperately trying to uncover. For experienced practitioners, Hermeticism is definitely not escapism. It is a powerful way of aligning your thought, your will, and your entire being. And this right here may actually be the absolute deepest secret inside the entire tradition. Hermeticism is not primarily about controlling the universe. Instead, it is about becoming readable to the universe. It teaches that the human being suffers because we live fragmented lives. We identify entirely with the lowest layer of ourselves, completely hypnotized by the surface of things. The path is not about self-invention, in the modern sense of the word. The path is about recollection. It is a return. It is a total reintegration. That is exactly why Hermeticism just keeps reappearing wherever people search for a wisdom that can unite philosophy, spirituality, symbols, and actual transformation. It gives a voice and a language to an intuition that so many traditions share. It tells us that the world is deeply meaningful, that the human soul is far greater than its conditioning, and that truth is something that must be lived, not merely believed in. So when someone tells you that Hermeticism is just some old occult philosophy, they are entirely missing the real point. Hermeticism endured through the ages because it offered something incredibly rare. It offered a vision where the cosmos is fully alive, where the human mind can actually awaken, and where the human being is so much more than just a biological accident drifting blindly through a silent universe. For me, that is exactly why the tradition still matters today. Not because it gives you easy answers, but because it absolutely refuses to accept the idea that reality is just empty. If this video changed the way you see Hermeticism, please leave a comment down below and tell me which thread fascinates you the most. Is it the ancient texts, alchemy, Rosicrucianism, esoteric Masonry, or maybe ceremonial magic? And hey, if you got value from this, please leave a like, because that tells the algorithm that this kind of deeper content is actually worth pushing out to more people. In the end, the irony here is almost perfect. Hermeticism began with the bold claim that human beings have forgotten who they truly are. Yet centuries later, people still approach it as if it were just another obscure system of symbols. But honestly, maybe that is exactly why it survives. It survives because each new generation has to completely rediscover it for themselves. Make sure to subscribe, share this video with someone who studies esotericism. Seriously, and go watch the playlist that is on your screen right now. Because the deeper you go into these traditions, the more you will start to see that they were never really separate at all.